Dear friends, we gather this afternoon to remember and to celebrate the life of one who filled our world with her love, her goodness, her extraordinary spirit, and outstanding example. In humility and gratitude, we turn to the wisdom of our tradition for comfort, for guidance, and for understanding. Throughout the centuries, whenever our people felt lost, confused, grief-stricken, they would say, "I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and of earth." Sinai, El Harim, Me'ayin, Yavo Ezri, Sinai, El Harim, Me'ayin, Yavo Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Osei Shamayim V'aretz, Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Osei Shamayim V'aretz, Sinai, El Harim, Me'ayin, Yavo Ezri, Sinai, El Harim, Me'ayin, Yavo Ezri. Adonai, what are we? That you have regard for us. What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going, for when we die we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright. They shall have peace." For those of you for whom the 23rd Psalm is familiar, I invite you to join with me in its recitation. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." We have already begun to learn that in the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, in the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, when we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember her. When I die, remember me with a smile and laughter. If thoughts of me provoke no love, only sadness and tears, I ask that I be soon forgotten. Give what's left of me away to children and old ones who wait to die. And if you must cry, cry for your brother or sister who walks in grief beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. You can love me most by letting love live within the circle of your arms, embracing the frightened ones. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. My dear Rachel, Ariana, dear Fran, David, Eliana, dear family, friends. Every year on Mother's Day, Vicki would lead a tour of Lakeview Cemetery, in which she would highlight the graves and thereby the stories of notable Cleveland or Cleveland-connected women. It was a remarkable project, original, creative, unconventional, iconoclastic. Vicki was not afraid to confront the taboo of discomfort with cemeteries and death that is so prevalent in our life-obsessed culture. Not only was Vicki fascinated by the stories, symbols, and stones of Cleveland cemeteries, having written a book about them, she planned her annual tour for Mother's Day, a day reserved for lunches, dinners, family gatherings, and entertainment, not the serious issues of life and death that a tour of the cemetery would seem to suggest. Vicki, of course, knew differently. She knew that cemeteries are rich sources of history and connection, and in her determined, persistent, visionary, and even stubborn way, she knew that such a tour would be enlightening, enriching, uplifting, and fun. Most of all, she knew that cemeteries are filled with stories, as many different stories as there are headstones and monuments. There is a very real sense in which Vicki was drawn to stories in her work, in her leisure time, in her activities and interests. At some level, she understood that the human story is endlessly compelling and captivating. Vicki's story began in the first-generation American home of Ruth and Emmerich Bloom in South Euclid. Vicki arrived between older sister Elaine and younger sister Frances, whose presence here today fills us with gratitude. This family is still mourning the loss of Elaine just 9.5 months ago, as our hearts go out to Fran, to Mark and Cheryl, Caitlin and Lindsay. In addition to the Lyndhurst South Euclid system for grade school, junior high, and Brush High School, Vicki was educated Jewishly at Beth Am Synagogue. She must have been inspired by the story of our people, as she became an active member and leader of USY, the congregation's youth group. After Brush, she went to Kent State University, the first in her family to attend college, which would also make her the first person in her family to spend a year abroad as part of her college experience, which she did in Israel where she lived on a kibbutz for 10 months. As her children have pointed out, she not only did all of the upwardly mobile things a Jewish child of the second half of the 20th century in America was supposed to do. She did it all in her own inimitable, boundary-pushing way. She had a certain self-assuredness, a confidence that made whatever she did seem entirely matter-of-fact and unremarkable. The reality was that she was an entirely independent thinker with an irresistible spirit of adventure. She loved her experience in Israel, which served to intensify her devotion to and passion for Judaism, and informed her family's Jewish life when she married and had children. In her singular way, Vicki married David Vigil, a Mexican-American who was raised as a Roman Catholic, but who agreed to raise a Jewish family as Kiva, Rachel, and Ariana all celebrated becoming bar or bat mitzvah and were confirmed at Fairmont Temple. And I had the privilege of being present at all of those joyous events. Upon returning from Israel, Vicki not only graduated from college, she went on for advanced degrees as she earned her MSW from Yeshiva University and a master's in public health from UC Berkeley. Along the way, she managed to backpack through South America on her own, lived for $1 a week at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, and bought her own home in the Mission District of San Francisco. The fact that she was a single woman making her way in the world seems not to have entered her consciousness. Where others might have seen obstacles or felt inhibited, she saw only possibility and felt free to pursue, to act, to be. With a writer's instinct and sensibility, she was writing her own story, original, uncensored, unpredictable, and engaging. It was also honest, authentic, sensitive, compassionate, and reflected her professionalism in all areas of her life. In her very first days as a social worker in Cleveland, she met with a young man by the name of Antoine Fisher, who had been raised for 14 years in a foster home. Vicki picked up that something was amiss in his circumstances and made a note of her discomfort and suspicions. He was ultimately released from that highly abusive situation. In later years, Antoine Fisher wrote a book about his life entitled Finding Fish, in which he mentioned Vicki Bloom as a social worker of great integrity and compassion. When the book was made into a movie starring Denzel Washington, Vicki was honored with 2 tickets to see the premiere at the Palace Theater. Vicki moved out to California to pursue her Master's of Public Health degree. It was in San Francisco that she and David met, at the housewarming party of mutual friends. Vicki was on crutches with a broken leg, and David offered her a ride home. They welcomed both Kiva and Rachel into their lives while living on the West Coast, but an offer from Vicki's father, Emery Bloom, for David to join him in his business, Acme Glass, proved to be the impetus they needed to return to Cleveland. It was here that Ariana was born, and Vicki worked first for the Catholic Charities, while David, the Catholic in the family, was working for the Jewish Family Service Association, helping in the resettlement of Russian Jews because he spoke fluent Russian. In her practical, down-to-earth but still unconventional way, Vicki never stopped working, even when her children were small. She felt particularly supported by her co-workers at Catholic Charities, who made it possible for Vicki to bring Ari to work, as there was always someone available to hold her. It is not hard to understand why someone who loves stories would be drawn to and would be very good at social work. Every person or patient or client with whom Vicki worked had a story and it was Vicky's responsibility to help that person take charge of his or her own story, something Vicki was certainly gifted in doing for herself. She eventually spent 22 years as a social worker with the Euclid City Schools, which gave her the flexibility of school breaks and vacations to be with her family and to pursue her other interests, and sometimes to pursue them both at once, which in her focused, determined, some would say stubborn way, she would do single-mindedly and often single-handedly. She decided in 1989, to be exact, that summer's vacation should be an experience in Mexico. David could not take off 8 weeks from work, so Vicki piled Kiva, Rachel, and Ariana into her Toyota minivan and drove from Cleveland to Texas and then across the border into Mexico, where she had arranged for them to stay with a host family for 6 weeks of learning, speaking Spanish, and experiencing the culture. At the end of their homestay, David joined them for 2 more weeks of touring the country. The entire summer sojourn came out of Vicki's original desire for the family to spend an entire year in a Spanish-speaking country. It was Vicki who found the program, did all of the paperwork, made all of the arrangements, and drove the car, with all of the challenges, including one breakdown that driving the car entailed. With so many of her other qualities, including her strength of mind and strength of will, her disciplined, determined, driven, ambitious nature, she was rock solid, responsible, and dependable. If she said she would do something or be somewhere, she was as good as her word. In fact, road trips seem to have been a popular Vigil family mode of travel, adventure, and vacation. They all have mostly fond memories of driving out to California to see San Francisco, to meet the California cousins, and to stop at every historical marker along the way. They also sang songs, played games, listened to books on tape, and created family memories they cherish as they traveled the length and breadth of this country. They did a lot of camping as well, for a while with the annual Cousins Campout, which David and Vicki founded as a way of pulling the family together every summer. It eventually grew, over the 44 years of its existence, into a very big weekend with up to 80 people in attendance. It could be challenging to be one of Vicki's children. She was strict, she set high standards, and had high expectations. She could be relentless in pursuit of a goal. She herself set a powerful example that could be difficult to emulate, but she gave her children enormous gifts of intellect, of independence, of inquiry, of courage, resilience, activism, and an awareness of the world firsthand that many never know or understand. As Kiva wrote, I am moved to remember smiles, laughter when cruising Highland Heights, a kayaking trip, missteps upon the library, Jamestown, and experimenting without power. Rachel reflected, I am profoundly sad, but also so thankful to have had such a magnificent and resilient mother. I owe her endless gratitude for the ambition and drive she instilled in me, and my life has been a working demonstration of her adventurous spirit and pursuit of knowledge. My mother's love of Judaism and her insistence that her children receive a Jewish education are a testament to the faith that she valued so highly, which has impacted me profoundly. This, above all, will stay with me always, and my life is both fuller and sweeter because my mom taught me to cherish my Jewish heritage. And Ariana acknowledges, Mom was a self-assured, independent, and determined person. I remember asking her how she ended up moving to Northern California in the early 70s, where she met my dad, and they got married and had my 2 older siblings. She told me, I was dating a guy who was always going on about San Francisco. After we broke up, I figured I would go there anyway. That was a typical explanation from my mom. Simple, direct, devoid of complicated emotions or hesitations. Mom had a strong sense of justice and fairness. Her views could be rigid, but I have no doubt her support for gender equity influenced me. I remember the NARAL donor envelopes that arrived at our house, and I have a photocopy of an early version of Our Bodies, Ourselves she passed down to me. My mom and I did not always have the easiest relationship. Like her, I was a boundary pusher, and I know raising 3 kids tried her patience. But by late high school and in the years after, when my siblings moved out of the house and she and my dad divorced, we became close. I know she was immensely proud of my academic achievements and the fact that, like her, I wrote and published books. I'm glad I was able to give her my most recent book, which is dedicated to her. Vicki also gave each of her children a handmade quilt, which she had promised to do. She was not known for her homemaking skills, but she made a terrific guacamole. Even David's Mexican family thought was the best. She made the most delicious spaghetti sauce in the world, according to Rachel, who would devour it on loaves of bread dipped into it. And she would make sugar cookies with her kids in all kinds of shapes and with holiday designs, which was a favorite activity, as well as treat. She taught them how to eat Buckeyes, and with Rachel loved to listen to the soundtracks of Les Mis and Cats, and enjoyed Phantom of the Opera and Evita. She loved Latin dancing with David, going to the theater with friends, volunteering for Meals on Wheels, even when her own illness was advancing, and travel of any kind, anywhere, for herself and or her loved ones. It was Vicki who encouraged Rachel to travel to Israel as part of the Nasiya program, which profoundly affected Rachel's life. And Ari had the great pleasure of treating each of her parents to an overseas trip where she was lecturing as a way of saying thank you for their love and support. In the early 80s, Vicki was featured on a local TV station as an example of the new breed of working mother. It was only her illness that made her stop working, but not before she wrote a new chapter in her work life, that of genealogist and author. I imagine that it was her social work that led to her interest in genealogy. As a social scientist, she would be curious about the origins and causes of her patients' difficulties and issues. At any rate, Vicki took great interest in reading the stories and local obituaries of Clevelanders and the legacies they left behind. She published 3 books about Cleveland cemeteries and conducting family research in Northeast Ohio. Cleveland Cemeteries, Stones, Symbols, and Stories, Finding Your Family History in Northeast Ohio, and Cemeteries of Northeast Ohio, Stones, Symbols, and Stories. We are grateful that she was able to witness her children's success in the world, and particularly the way in which they live easily and comfortably in multicultural environments. We are grateful that she knew Rachel's significant other, R.J. Mitchell, and could appreciate at some level the love and support he gave to Rachel and the family. We are especially grateful that she knew her granddaughter, Eliana. As Ari has shared, Mom and Eliana made a great pair, both easygoing, happy to simply take a stroll outside, and with about the same attention span. Watching them interact was often sweet and funny. A few weeks ago, when we visited, Mom was rarely speaking coherent words, but when she heard Eliana squeal, she said, "Oh, how cute." A few weeks after that, Eliana insisted on climbing into bed with her. She also always offered her bubby a toy, or her water bottle, and lots of kisses. And I think we can safely predict today that Eliana is a chip off the old block. There were more chapters to Vicky's story that were cut off by the cruelty of her illness. And yet we know that she managed to include more material in her abruptly ended tome than many of us do in lives blessed with far more years. She left a sacred legacy of doing and caring and accomplishing, worthy of her own research and documentation. She bequeathed to us eternal gifts of mind and heart and spirit with which to write our own stories, inspired now eternally by hers. Zichrona livracha. May the memory of Vicki Vigil be always for blessing, and let us say, Amen. O God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort, and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures, and the soul endures as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. Please rise. שוכן במרומים, אמצעי מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים, כזו רקיע מזהירים את נשמת אביטל בת חיים ורות שהלכה לעולמה. בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרו החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Vicki Vigil, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
We ask you to step forward this time.